You think you know what it means to love someone? To really love them? I thought I did. For 26 years, I thought love was being the reliable one. I thought it was being the person who stays calm when everyone else is spinning out of control. I thought love was a safety net, something you build out of logic, sacrifice, and silence, so the people you care about don't have to feel the hard ground. But I learned, in the most brutal way imaginable, that sometimes love isn't a safety net. Sometimes love is a mirror, and if you truly love someone, you have to be brave enough to hold that mirror up to their face, even if it shatters the perfect, polished life they've spent years trying to build. You have to be willing to be the villain in their story, if it means they actually get to have a story to tell. This is the story of the day I held up that mirror to my own sister, at her wedding, in front of 200 people who had spent thousands of dollars to be there, and how the words I said in that silent, golden ballroom changed both of our lives forever. The moment lives in my memory like a slow-motion film reel that someone has saturated with too much light. The reception hall was a masterpiece of safe elegance, cream-colored silk, gold-rimmed plates, and thousands of white orchids that probably cost more than my first car. The band was playing some soft, mid-tempo love song that was designed to be forgotten the moment it ended. My sister, Lily, was a vision. There's no other word for it. She was a sculpture in white lace, her hair pinned back in a perfect, rigid bun that didn't let a single stray hair escape. She was floating on her new husband's arm, drifting through the crowd like a ghost in a beautiful cage. And then she turned. Her eyes found mine across the dance floor. They weren't the eyes of the girl I grew up with. Lily used to have eyes that moved constantly, looking for colors, looking for shapes, looking for a reason to laugh. These eyes were hollow. They were dark. They were full of a desperate, trapped energy that I'd been watching build for months, like steam behind a dam that was seconds away from bursting. She let go of Mark's arm. The crowd seemed to part instinctively as she walked toward me. I could see the heavy hem of her dress sweeping the floor. A hush fell over the room, piece by piece, as people realized the bride was heading for the maid of honor with a look that wasn't exactly sisterly. She stopped a foot away. I could smell the expensive hairspray, the cloyingly sweet perfume Mark had chosen for her, and the faint, sour tang of the champagne she'd been gulping down since the ceremony. Her voice was a venomous whisper, intended only for my ears. She said, "You. This is all because of you." I didn't even have time to blink before she screamed it, a raw, guttural sound that left the room dead silent. "You ruined my life." The silence that followed was suffocating. I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning. I could hear a fork drop on a china plate across the room. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with a terror that I knew all too well, the terror of a scene. My father looked like he'd been struck, and Mark stood statue still. His perfect, practiced smile was gone, replaced with a look of cold, calculating confusion. He wasn't worried about Lily, he was worried about the optics. In that silence, I looked at my sister, not at the bride in the designer dress, but at the little girl who used to cover our bedroom walls with glitter and charcoal. I looked at the artist who believed that messy things were the only beautiful things. I looked at the woman who was about to bury herself alive just to please a man who wanted a trophy, not a partner. I took a breath. It felt like the first full breath I'd taken since the engagement was announced. I said, "No, Lily, I'm not ruining it. I'm throwing you a lifeline." I reached into the small clutch purse hanging from my wrist. My fingers closed around a single crumpled piece of thermal paper, a receipt I had been carrying like a secret sin all day. I held it up so she could see the faded blue ink, and I told her that Mark picked up her flowers yesterday. I told her about the orchids, the ones she spent 6 months searching for because she said they represented her soul. He paid cash. He told the florist she'd probably be a brat about them, but that she'd get over it once the ring was on her finger. He joked about getting a refund after the wedding because he knew she'd be too emotional to notice they weren't what she asked for. I let that hang in the air. I looked past her, straight at Mark. One of his eyebrows twitched. It was the first hairline fracture in his perfect porcelain mask. I told her this wasn't about flowers. It was a pattern. It was a message. He doesn't want a partner. He wants a project. He wants someone he can edit and correct until he's happy with the final draft. I told her she might call it love, but most people would call it a hostage situation. It starts with the flowers, but where does it end? Does it end with her paintings, her friends, the way she laughs when she's had too much wine? Because I'd already seen those things start to disappear. I took a step forward and told her that her choice today wasn't between a wedding and a scene. It was between a performance and a life. I placed the crumpled piece of receipt on the edge of the sweetheart table, right next to the pristine, untouched wedding cake. I told her I'd be outside if she wanted the life. Then I turned around and walked out. I didn't run. I walked through the parted crowd, past the stunned band members, and out through the heavy oak doors into the cool, quiet night. The silence behind me was louder than any scream. To understand why I did it, to understand why I blew up my own family in front of 200 people, you have to understand the 20 years of the brain and the heart that led us there. That's what our parents called us. It started when we were toddlers. I was the brain. I was the one who sorted my Legos by color and size. I was the one who had a savings account at age 6. I liked logic. I liked spreadsheets. I liked things that could be solved. Lily was the heart. She was a beautiful, creative, terrifying chaos. Her side of our shared bedroom was a volcano of half-finished canvases, glitter, and clothes. She felt everything twice as hard as anyone else. If a stray dog walked past our house, she'd cry for an hour. If she found a beautiful leaf, she'd act like she'd discovered a diamond. I loved her, but I didn't understand her. To me, her life seemed like a series of avoidable disasters. She fell for guys who were projects, the charming musician who borrowed her rent money and never came back, or the brooding poet who lived on our couch for 6 months and ate all our food. And because I was the brain, I became her project manager. I was the one who called the tow truck when her car broke down. I was the one who loaned her the money she'd never pay back. I was the one who listened to her sob at 3 in the morning about a love that was always just about to work if she gave a little more of herself away. I built my life like I was following a blueprint, accounting degree, steady job at a top firm, a 401k that I checked every morning. My world was built on spreadsheets where every debit had a credit. Lily's world was built on feeling, and it was always on the verge of total collapse. Then she met Mark. Mark didn't look like a disaster. He looked like me. He was a financial advisor. He wore shirts that were always perfectly pressed. He talked about asset allocation and long-term growth. When Lily brought him home for the first time, my mother sighed with a relief. So loud it was almost embarrassing. She whispered to me in the kitchen that finally there was a man with a plan. She thought he'd be so good for her and keep her grounded. I wanted to believe it. I truly did. But the brain in me, the part of me trained to spot irregularities in a ledger, started running diagnostics, and the numbers weren't adding up. The first red flag was what I call the corrections. It started small. We'd be at dinner, and Lily would be telling a story about a painting she was working on. Mark would wait for her to take a breath and then lean in. He'd say, "Actually, sweetheart, you used the wrong term there. You mean chiaroscuro, not just shading. And it was Tuesday you finished it, not Monday. Remember? We had the meeting with the realtor on Monday." He said it with a smile. He said it like he was helping her. But I watched Lily's face. Every time he corrected her, she'd shrink a little. She'd stop talking. By the end of the meal, she'd be nodding along to whatever he was saying, her own voice silenced. Then came the announcements. They were never plans. Mark didn't ask Lily where she wanted to live. He told her about the house he'd already looked at in a gated community 40 miles away from her art studio. He didn't ask her about her career. He talked about how nice it would be when she could focus on the home instead of doodling for pennies. I tried to talk to her once, about 6 months into their relationship. We were sitting on her balcony, and she was drinking white wine, the dry kind Mark liked, even though I knew she preferred sweet Riesling. I tried to be careful. I asked her if he ever asked her what she wanted, about the house, about the art. She flared up instantly. She told me I was just jealous and that I couldn't stand that she finally had something real and stable. She said Mark was building a life with her and looking out for her. She said he was the first person who hadn't treated her like a mess that needed fixing. I wanted to scream. He was treating her like a mess. He was just fixing her by erasing her. But I shut up. I played the part of the supportive sister. I went to the engagement party. I helped her pick out those safe bridesmaid dresses. I watched as she took down her vibrant, strange paintings from her apartment and replaced them with generic, professional prints that Mark said complemented the space. The heart was being systematically debugged, and everyone else in the family was cheering it on. 2 nights before the wedding, Lily showed up at my apartment. It was past midnight. She wasn't wearing makeup and she looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. She sat on my sofa and stared at her hands and whispered that she couldn't do it. My heart leapt. I thought she finally saw it. I told her that whatever it was, we could fix it. I told her we could cancel the venue and tell the guests there was an emergency. I told her I had the savings and I'd handle the fallout. But she wasn't talking about Mark. She was talking about the seating chart. She was worried about Aunt Carol getting drunk and the salmon being late and the flowers. She said Mark thought the orchids were too busy and that we should have gone with roses. She was spiraling about the production, not the marriage. She was terrified of failing the performance Mark had directed for her. I grabbed her shoulders and asked her if she actually wanted to marry Mark. Not if he was a good man or if he was safe, but if she wanted to wake up next to him every day for the next 50 years. She looked at me, and for a split second the mask slipped. I saw pure, unadulterated animal terror. She whispered that he was a good man, like she was reciting a prayer. She said he was safe and that everyone said so. I told her that safe isn't the same as happy, and lucky isn't being managed by a man who thinks your personality is a defect. She stood up abruptly and got angry. She told me I just couldn't be happy for her, and that I never believed she deserved a real, grown-up life. She said Mark was building a life with her and looking out for her. She said he was the first person who hadn't treated her like a mess that needed fixing. I wanted to scream. He was treating her like a mess. He was just fixing her by erasing her. But I shut up. I played the part of the supportive sister. I went to the engagement party. I helped her pick out those safe bridesmaid dresses. I watched as she took down her vibrant, strange paintings from her apartment and replaced them with generic, professional prints that Mark said complemented the space. The heart was being systematically debugged, and everyone else in the family was cheering it on. The morning of the wedding was a blur of hairspray and tension. At 10 in the morning, I went to pick up the final bouquets. The florist was a young girl, and she looked stressed. She told me there was a bit of a mix-up with the payment yesterday. She said a man came in, the groom, and said there was a change of plan. He wanted a more traditional arrangement and paid the difference in cash. I felt a cold drop of sweat slide down my back. I asked her what he said. The girl looked uncomfortable and fished a crumpled piece of paper out of a trash bin. She said he was intense and told her her fiancé was going to be a brat about the change, but that she'd get over it once the ring was on her finger. He even asked about the refund policy for after the ceremony. He said, she'll probably want to return them on Monday once the drama dies down, so just keep the receipt handy. She handed me that thermal paper. There it was. In the margin, the girl had scrawled a note to herself. Customer seemed off, joked about bride hating the flowers. Weird energy. I stood in that shop and I felt the world tilt. This wasn't a mistake, it was a mission. Mark was intentionally sabotaging her choices on her wedding day just to prove he could. He was testing his leash. I had 2 choices. I could hand her this bomb when she was putting on her veil and be the sister who ruined the morning, or I could let her walk into a gilded cage knowing I had the key in my purse and didn't use it. I chose a third option. I paid for the original orchids with my own credit card. I delivered them to the bridal suite. I watched her eyes light up when she saw them, the one piece of her that was left in the wedding. I watched her kiss Mark at the altar, unaware that he had spent the previous afternoon mocking her taste to a stranger. I waited for the reception. I waited for the moment when the safe life felt the most real, and then I hit it with the truth. The fallout was nuclear. The reception didn't just end, it evaporated. Mark tried to grab the receipt, but Lily had already picked it up. She looked at the date. She looked at the timestamp. She looked at the note the florist had written. She didn't scream at him. She didn't cry. She just looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in 2 years. And then she walked out. I spent the next 3 days in total isolation. My phone was a firework display of rage. My mother was hysterical, telling me I'd humiliated them and destroyed Lily's only chance at stability. My father told me I was no daughter of his until I apologized for the insanity. I turned the phone off. I sat in my quiet apartment and I waited. I wondered if I'd made a mistake. I wondered if safe was actually better than ruined. Then, on the 4th day, there was a knock at my door. It was Lily. She wasn't wearing white lace. She was wearing old, paint-splattered jeans and a sweatshirt. Her hair was a tangled mess of curls. Her eyes were red, but they weren't hollow anymore. They were bright. They were alive. She didn't say a word. She walked into my living room, went to my far wall, and took down the boring, generic landscape print I'd bought to match my sofa. She placed it face down on the floor. From a large bag, she pulled out a canvas. It was the painting I hadn't seen in years. It was a painting of our childhood bedroom. But it wasn't a split room. It was a fusion. My orderly shelves were bleeding into her chaotic stars. The brain and the heart weren't fighting for space. They were creating a nebula together. She told me it was over. She said the marriage was being annulled. My mother was telling everyone she'd had a nervous breakdown. My dad said she was ungrateful. Mark was demanding the ring back and sent her a bill for the flowers. She looked at the painting on my wall and whispered, "So, you were right. My life is officially ruined." I walked over and stood beside her. I put my arm around her shoulder, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was managing a project. I felt like I was standing next to my sister. I said, "No. I think it's just beginning." It's been a year now. Lily lives in a small studio downtown. It smells like oil paint and cheap coffee. She's not safe. She's struggling to pay her bills, and she's had to start her career over from scratch. She's dating a guy named Leo who is a woodworker. He has sawdust in his hair, he forgets what day it is, and he looks at her like she's the most fascinating thing he's ever seen. When she paints, he sits in the corner and just watches her. He doesn't correct her, he doesn't fix her, he just loves her. My parents still haven't forgiven me. We speak once a month, and the conversations are short and cold. They still think I'm the villain. They still think I broke something that was working. But they're wrong. I didn't break a marriage, I broke a cage. I learned that being the reliable one doesn't mean keeping the peace. It means being the person who is willing to start a war to save someone you love. It means knowing that sometimes the most logical thing you can do is to embrace the chaos. I still have my spreadsheets, I still have my height-ordered books, but on my wall I have a painting that reminds me every single day that the brain is useless without the heart. And most importantly, I learned that if someone tells you they're throwing you a lifeline, you should probably look at what they're trying to pull you out of. Because safe can be the most dangerous place in the world, and sometimes you have to lose the life you thought you wanted to find the one you actually deserve. My sister screamed I ruined her life, and honestly, it was the best thing I ever did for her.